striking report from the National Security Strategy, which was published a little earlier on today, saying the UK government should prepare for the potential of a wartime scenario on the UK homeland for the first time in many years. Now, the review itself highlights, I think perhaps unsurprisingly, Russia and Iran as potential threats. It says that the latter's hostile activity, of course, Iranian hostile activity on British soil, is increasing in an effort to silence critics as well as directly threatening the UK. I want to know from you, when you hear of these threats, because they sound very scary, they sound very grand, crucially, other than when we do have Iranian attacks on our soil, I don't know if we always put two and two together and recognise the sort of serious overarching threat. So I think broadly, do you take these threats seriously? Have you started to take these threats seriously? What would it take, if not for a national security strategy, for you to sort of wake up to the fact, and myself included, that we are facing a pretty perilous situation? Just to repeat, the national security strategy saying we need to prepare for the potential of a wartime scenario on British soil. Should we be worried? You heard what Hamish de Bretton-Gordon said then. Do you sort of echo his words?
I was chuckling then, Henry, so I apologise for being another military analyst of the same sort of vintage. I would characterise it slightly differently. I've got, I know we're radio, but I've got a lot of grey hair. I've been around. I was served in the Cold War. We lived through a time when we had to be ready for war at a moment's notice. It was a very fine line between peace and war, and we had to be ready every minute of the day. We did 24 hours a day training. We were armed, ready to go. For the last 35 years, we haven't had that tension. Our society has got used to that tension. All of a sudden now, it feels like we're returning to a more dangerous world. Now, don't get me wrong, we still slept soundly at night, even in that time, but we configured ourselves differently. We were more ready, both as a military, but as whole of society, ready for that sort of threat. And I give you an example that we've got Bryce Norton, literally earlier on, when a whole lot of protesters ran in and sprayed some paint, and people call it vandalism. Unfortunately, we can do that when in a peacetime environment when we're not under threat. When we are, that is sabotage. That is actually part of our critical national infrastructure that has been taken away from us. We used to have armed guards. Nobody would dare get near to a military aircraft because, frankly, they'd be shot if they walked anywhere close to it. In our politically correct world, we're scared of that, but actually we're returning to those days where we do need to be much more mindful that if we're going to live in a society which we all love and cherish, we need to be prepared to look after it. And I think that's part of what this new world order, that's what the new national security strategy is all about.
Are we sort of moving more towards war than jaw, sort of right through might, the world of President Trump?
I think we are. I served a lifetime in the military, and I don't think anybody in the military wants to go to war. I genuinely think, if you've ever watched the film A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson, it's I stand on the wall. I deter our nation's enemies by being the most fearsome beast you can be. We deter enemy action by being robust, by being prepared, by being ready. It's not about fighting a war, it's making sure we deter so that any nation's enemies look at us and go, is the benefit we're going to get outweighed by the threat, the risks involved? And at the moment, we've become very complacent. We've been used to 35 years of peace. We now need to get ourselves muscled up, ponied up, stand proud, and make sure as a whole of society we are robust and ready, and therefore deterring our nation's enemies.
But what do we need to see, Sean? Because sort of listeners are hearing ad nauseum these points about 5% of GDP on defence, the NATO idea that's come out of this summit, and they hear that. They hear about the kit we send to Ukraine, for example. They hear about being on high alert. I mean, what actually needs to change for us to get mentally ready for that wartime footing, as this review warns?
Well, there's a number of things. I think one of the things is we get very scared, and I'm a taxpayer. I get worried about how much money we're going to spend. I'm sure you're a taxpayer as well.
Yes.
It's and therefore the worry about 3.5%, 5%. It looks like just a sum of money. If we were to make this a Team UK enterprise. Let's face it, the US produces a hell of a lot of weapons, not only for its national enterprise, but also for export. It generates huge amounts of revenue for the country. We in the UK have a huge pedigree and great reputation on the world stage. We should be generating a military capability. Let's face it, it's one of the few growth areas in the globally at the moment. If we could make that an enterprise upon which our nation starts to export and generate wealth, I know for some viewers that will be unsavory, but actually that's a way for us to actually make this pay. And the one other thing I would say is that there is a view. I remember there was one of my erstwhile generals in the army who left as chief of general staff, who was dead against conscription when he was in the military because he thought it would undermine the military. Since he's left, he is an absolute advocate for it. Why? Because although it would be painful for the military, society would better understand why the military is really important. And actually, the more you invest in it today, the less likely you are to go and fight tomorrow. And that is therefore why we need to get our society back on side.
Well, I remember people sort of scoffed at Rishi Sunak, not to drag you into the political arena, but at the election he promised this, not quite conscription, but it was a sort of a national enrolment type thing. Do you think that is where we are sort of moving towards, Sean?
Well, I'd be very cautious about scaring any of your listeners here because I the dangerous people conscription. Suddenly, people think that we're rushing lots of our young men and women off to war. I do think we as a society have got used to outsourcing defence of our nation to the nation's military. And that's fine in a peacetime environment where we go away from these shores to go and fight in Iraq or Afghanistan, and it all happens away from our shores. The trouble is the threat is coming to our boundaries, to our shores, and therefore we need to be better aware. We need to be better aware as a society. If that is a way of actually better encouraging our nation to be better prepared, there's lots of nations around Europe, Norway particularly, that actually has conscription, and they have a very, very vibrant defensive culture in the country. I'm not suggesting that's the answer, but I do think we have to shift from this post-Cold War peace dividend where we believe everything is fine to actually there is a nasty world out there. We have a large moat around us in terms of water, which helps protect us. But my goodness, we need to do more. Otherwise, we're going to be taken advantage of.
Thank you, Sean. Always appreciate your time. Sean Bell is a former fighter pilot, military analyst, co-host of the Red Matrix podcast.